those of you who have been here for the last few weeks, we've been looking at some high knee shield half guard, and the reason why we're kind of steering you in this direction is because it's quite a user-friendly position, and everyone will commonly find themselves there, and it's a suitable game for people with groups of different styles, and you can kind of start to build and extrapolate from there into a more complex and advanced game. So just to recap what we've done so far, we've been looking at the high knee shield, and we're just looking at a scenario where our partner is on the knees. Okay, as you start to go up against more complex guard passes, you're going to see them standing up, but really important that we start to work from the knees initially. Now, as a given rule, I always have my two frames obstructing and framing at the shoulders. My frames can act as my hands, or they can act as my foot or my knee. The further away at the extremity our frame is, the better. So I'd much rather frame with my hand as opposed to my forearm, okay, because I can just get more distance. Same thing with my lower limb frames. I'd much rather frame with my foot as opposed to my knee. Not everyone can frame with their feet, especially under pressure. If they don't have that hip dexterity, it can be quite tricky. So what we covered was one of our first go-tos from our high knee shield half guard, where we're looking at recovering our bottom leg. If we can recover our bottom leg, we're now not at threat of a knee cut or an immediate guard pass anymore. We can actually get back into a much safer position, which would be the close guard in this scenario. So with every off balance, we're thinking about manipulating weight distribution. His right leg has my right leg trapped, so I need to make that light. So I off balance using like a scissor sweep motion. And the goal is to take weight off of his right leg. And what's happening here is my cue when the weight is off his right leg is when I feel his butt disconnect from my leg, like so. Now I know that he's slightly light, and I have time to retract my leg and start to come back into an outside leg position where I can now start to shoot my close guard. This isn't to say that you can't play your underhook half guard variations. We also had a while back as well, we looked at some upper limb attacks, going for our cutting armbar and our reverse arm lock sequence, and we also had our X guard entries from here. What I want you guys to start looking at now, and I will explain why I want you guys to look at this, is instead of controlling this side of the body with this collar sleeve grip, I want you guys to start looking at controlling this side of the body. Okay? We're still framing both of the shoulders with either one of these variations. It's just a slightly different gripping sequence. So right now I have my knee framing his shoulder, my cross collar grip framing his shoulder, and I have my sleeve grip. Now what we're going to be doing is we're switching the same side collar grip. So my knuckles frame his shoulder, and now when I lasso my foot over, my foot frames his shoulder. So this is one of my favorite guards to play, this half lasso. Okay, it's not a full lasso, so I'm not hooking under the tricep, I'm not hooking deep. I'm just stepping on his shoulder. A big reason why I'm just stepping on the shoulder is because I can stop pretty much all of his guard passes from here. And we're not letting the foot hook underneath. So I'm stepping on the shoulder, and to address the other shoulder, like I said, we're framing with that fist with this same side collar grip. Important detail here, keep your knuckles in front of your thigh. The moment your knuckles start to track inwards, it's a lot easier for him to circle his hand to my hamstring. And now I can't actually pull at his upper body anymore. So always make sure that the knuckles sit in front. What actually creates the tension here is actually my knee pulling tightly towards my chest as opposed to the actual rowing motion of my sleeve grip. The other thing as well, don't push too far back. If I start to push too far back, I'm actually doing a hand circling motion for him, so we want to avoid this. All I want you guys to get a feel of now is just follow the person on top to try and start to drive in. And I want you guys to get a feel for how we're maintaining our frame and also maintaining this position where we're staying on our side. don't want to start to get my hips squared up. If my hips start to get squared up, I have to start to retract my bottom leg. The other thing as well, like I mentioned before, we want to make sure that our knuckles stay in front of our thigh and we're constantly maintaining this strong lasso position with our foot planted on the shoulder, in between his shoulder and pec, not letting our foot slip through. So again, person on top is just going to apply a bit of pressure. I want you to stay in your side, keep your lasso grip, keep your half lasso, and your frame on the shoulder. Any questions so far? All right, give this a shot, and then we're going to progress into some sweeps. 2, 3. So one thing that's really important, so get the lasso. One thing that's really important is that we don't lose this foot on the chest. So I saw a few people kind of immediately pulling this through. If this happens, it's going to be a lot harder for this leg to frame me away. So now if I were to pop up onto my feet, I could potentially start to pull further through if my opponent's foot was hooked underneath my tricep. It's a lot harder for me to get swept here, especially as he starts to lose my wrist, and sometimes I can start to loop my hand behind the hamstring. What a lot of people will start to do as well is if this happens, they will start to circle their hand behind before they pass this. So what you'll notice as well is that a lot of people, when you're playing the half lasso, they will actually try and force your foot into a shallow lasso, and then they can start to In regards to how we can get to the lasso, a lot of the times just framing with both hands on the shoulders is a really good way of getting to this half lasso. If you're worried about kind of losing the sleeve as you go to switch the grip, you do have the option of grabbing the sleeve grip from here. There is the concern though that as I start to kick my leg through, maybe my opponent is baiting me to kick my leg through so he can slip over my hip and knee line and catch a body grip. If this is the case, you can always look at stepping the foot in the armpit and then going for elbows. Now, what we're going to be looking at is a little sequence where we try and free our bottom leg. Because like we were doing with the previous sequence, we were looking at hitting like almost like a scissor sweep to take weight off of our leg and then free our bottom leg. So we're doing the exact same thing. This time though, instead of having our shin on the inside, we've got our foot. Okay, so we've got like a longer frame. So what I can start to do from here now is start to stretch him out, making sure that I'm not letting him circle his hand. And if I off balance well enough from here, I can start to free my bottom leg. If you lose your lasso, we can always recover it by stretching out our leg, pulling the hand back in front of the thigh, and coming back to the lasso. Now what you'll see is that as I start to try and off balance, if people catch on to the fact that I'm trying to free my bottom leg, they're going to really insist on keeping their right hip stapling over my foot. So if I start to do this, I can't off balance him. I know that his weight is quite heavy on this right hip. So as this starts to happen, I can potentially look for an arm drag as well. So this is the sequence I want you guys to start to combo this with. So you're trying to off balance, you feel he's too heavy, you're going to start to take the lasso out, pass his sleeve grip past our center line, cup his tricep, and start to sit up. Once we're here, obviously we have our back takes, but a lot of the time our opponent will look at squaring up with us and potentially dropping their shoulders back to the mat to hide their back. So a lot of the time people take weight off of this leg and put weight on his hip to Obviously, if they don't do this, you can start to catch their back. So same thing as the previous drill in regards to having the person on top trying to maintain their pressure. They're going to be trying to circle their hand behind your thigh. They might be looking at tapping your foot underneath. So we need to make sure that we're quite diligent in maintaining this foot on their shoulder and pec. They're putting pressure in, we're keeping our hips turned inwards. We're looking at balancing them away. If they don't get off balanced, if we can't take the weight off of our foot, we're hitting our arm drag. Make sure with the arm drag that they don't have a grip on this side. Make sure that you can actually redirect their hand past your sensor line. You don't want to make the mistake of coming up for the arm drag and then potentially getting caught in a body lock. Off balancing, they insist on keeping their weight far back. I take this sleeve past my sensor line, taking my lasso out, cupping the tricep, and kind of axe kicking up so that I can start to throw my upper body towards his shoulder. If we can post them on all fours, we can start to work for turtle position and our back takes. If he decides to hide his back by bringing his shoulders to the mat, we can start to take the swing. Sometimes your opponent will insist on standing up, so you might have to come up on a single leg, but you will likely be in a strong single leg finishing position. More time, half lasso. Now, person on top, make sure that you give your partner a feel for what it's like to actually get off balance so that you can actually free the bottom leg. Because remember, when I'm passing, I'm never trying to stay like this on my knees. I'm always trying to come off my knees so I can, this is for me personally, I prefer to tripod when I pass so I can put more weight into my opponent. So if you have the lasso, I'm usually going to not accept being stuck on my knees. I'm usually going to try and take my hips higher than my head so I can start to put pressure in. So with people that pass like this, it's actually going to be a lot easier for you to free your bottom leg. Okay, so this is to kind of give you a perspective of the different types of guard passes you will come across. Sure, you'll get people kind of insisting on being here, but there's not a lot people can do here to actually pass you. It's more so the people that insist on coming off of their knees to free their legs that will actually be a problem. And so like I was saying, it is this type of guard pass that you'll likely have more success with recovering the bottom leg. So as you go for your off balance, yep, now you can free the bottom leg, bring it back to the shoulder. Does that make sense, guys? Let's stop the top of the ball. When I start to off balance, if I can take weight off this right leg, I can start to recover the bottom leg. If my opponent insists on keeping it trapped, I can start to go for my arm drag. Any questions so far, guys? All right, let's give this one a shot. 2, 3. So one thing that a lot of you guys will find quite tricky when you're going for this arm drag is sometimes what happens is people kind of almost get perpendicular and they can keep a lot of weight with this hand on like your hip basically. And so the more perpendicular I can get and the more weight I can get through my hand, this is like quite a common posture you'll see for people trying to maybe knee cut, maybe if they're trying to long step. Okay, there's a few scenarios where people will kind of angle themselves like this to pass from here. And so if you are to go for an arm drag here and I can kind of keep weight down, so start to go for arm drag, it's going to be quite hard, and now you've lost the frame and it's a lot easier for you to attach to the head and start to cross face or potentially even long step. So it's really important that we want our opponent to not be coming in like perpendicular where they can put weight through this hand, It's going to be a lot better when they're kind of parallel linear to us. So now, start to go for the arm drag here. It's a lot easier for him to take the weight off my hand and pass my arm past the center. Just so I can tuck my bottom. Sometimes people will have a collar grip here. It's really important that you break this grip. Okay, if you can strip this grip, it's going to be a lot easier for you to go for your arm. Again, if I'm like kind of crunched in and my opponent is really angling like perpendicular to me, it can be quite tricky to go for the arm drag, especially when he can be heavy with his arm. So once I strip this grip and I kind of square him up with me so that he's in line, parallel with me, now it's a lot easier for me to work my arm drag. But again, I want to chain this with trying to recover my bottom leg. So I want him to be heavy with his right leg, right hip, and now I can start to drag him across. Obviously, the more you can get his weight coming into you, the better. You just don't want his weight setting on your hip where he can potentially stay really attached. Okay, so it's quite tricky in that sense. So make sure the grip is off, make sure he's in line, try and off balance him as he starts to resist and stay heavy. Then we're dragging through. If we can attach to the far hip, it's going to be really easy for us to stop him rolling away. Ideally stopping in turtle. If not, you can start to work for the back from here. I'll just show it one more time. Cool. All right, let's go. 1, 2, 3.
you.